flow just kept coming, and I don't know what was going through some of these clients' heads that were watching me show up to their estimate with crutches. That had to be weird. Like, hey, I'm gonna call a tree guy, come do my job, and he shows up to do the estimate with crutches. It's like, what happened to you? Oh, I fell out of a tree. Oh, I want to hire this guy. Like, I don't know how I got I don't know how I got any of these jobs, but I did. People were hiring me still. I'm thankful for that. Today I'm going to do a sort of unconventional video for people who are interested. I'm going to share a little bit of the story of my accident to the best that I can remember it. And I just totally decided to do this spur of the moment because it's October 8th, which is the day that I fell in 2020. So it's October 8th, 2025. This is the 5-year anniversary to my catastrophic tie-in point failure where I fell. They estimate 30 to 35 feet. And I just want to go through the whole story. I've told a lot of people the story. People are kind of inspired that I stayed with tree work and got back to climbing, that I came through that recovery. But I want to kind of go through what the reason why I think it happened, but also talk about the process of that recovery, and then just share a little bit of how God has used all that evil for good, that calamity that came on me, and yeah, let's just get right into it. So in 2020, I was really ambitious, learning to climb, and my skill set was really just exploding from where it had been years prior. And I remember my friend Nick needed a job. He was a recent friend of mine. He owned a bigger tree service in Waynesville, and I was eager to impress him. So he wasn't really my friend. He was more like a person that I knew, and I was going to contract climb for him. And he liked me because I was a Christian, so we kind of became friends the first time I worked for him, but we didn't really know each other very well, and I was still very eager to impress him, and I looked up to him. I still do look up to him in a lot of ways. But that day, the night before, I was exhausted because I had done like 4 jobs back to back, and I remember calling him or texting him that night, the night before the job, saying, Nick, do you need me to come in? Because I, could I maybe just be a ground guy? Do you really, really need me as a climber? And he texted back, yes, I really do. I'm counting on you to climb. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to honor my word that I gave to Nick, and I'm going to climb for him. I just decided in my mind that's what I was going to do, even though I was totally exhausted. But I do want to just say, I'm not in any way blaming Nick for what happened. It's not his fault. I mean, he had me scheduled, and it's my fault that I decided to try to do 4 jobs back to back prior, that were all kind of intense climbing jobs. And I felt like I was Superman. I mean, I'm like, I came out of the Army after 6 years active duty in the infantry, airborne infantry, Ranger graduate, graduate from Ranger school, a few other simple accolades. And I had done downhill mountain biking. I mean, I had done, amateur boxing just a little bit. I had done just a lot of different things. And I felt like, unstoppable, really. I was 28. I was getting into rock climbing and getting better and better with tree climbing, running half marathons and stuff. I mean, I felt like I could do whatever, so what's 4 jobs back to back? I mean, that's not a big deal. I love climbing, so it wasn't that bad. And so against against my better judgment, I went into this job because I wanted to honor my commitment. And I remember being so excited to do the work. This is huge tulip tree. And I spent some time getting my line up in there. And I think I had my line set around 80 feet, maybe 90. I mean, it was really high. And I used a canopy choke with the middle of my SRT line. I had like kind of a quickie or running like an alpine butterfly. And I used throw line to pull the tail through at the midpoint. And I choked it all the way up on a stem in this tulip tree. I think around 80 or 90 feet up. And so now there's 2 lines of my SRT rope hanging down. One of them is a release. If you pull it, it'll pull that alpine butterfly down the system and retrieve the rope. The other side is a choke. If you pull that side, it chokes the alpine butterfly up against the stem. Some of you are probably familiar with what I'm describing, others might not be, but you know, it's just an SRT canopy anchor. That's all it is. Well, I didn't have my akimbo with me when I set it up. I set this rope up, I looked at it from a bunch of different angles, I liked it, I was good with it, but somebody was talking to me, a guy from Nick's crew was talking to me. He was asking me, I think he asked me if I wanted him to double man weight test it. And I was like, no, it's fine. And we were talking about other stuff. I don't remember what else. But I went back to get my akimbo from my bag. Like, I had my harness on, I had everything, I was all ready to go. I just needed to get my akimbo. So I got my akimbo, and I'm still talking to this guy. And I just grabbed a rope and hooked in. Now, I think I grabbed the wrong rope. That is my theory to this day. Nick believes that I was around a sprout, that I had some kind of optical illusion that it looked like I was on the stem, but I'm like 90% sure that I was choked on the stem, not on a sprout, and that I grabbed the retrieval side of my system by accident. I routed into that, put my foot ascenders on. I had a foot ascender and a knee ascender, and I started rope walking up. Now, why did it not just come undone? Well, this is where the sprout comes into play, because Nick saw an epicormic sprout that got ripped out after the fact. Like, he saw that as like some of the evidence later on, and he thought that that's what I was on. I think that epicormic sprout is what caught my alpine butterfly, the knot, from just coming totally undone. So that knot jammed up into that sprout, and it held me. Now, if any of you who've like used this system to climb on, you probably already know that it can be a bear to retrieve. Like, I've had sometimes to have 2 dudes yanking on that retrieval side to finally get it to come loose, especially if that knot is getting stuck in a union, like getting stuck on a crotch or something like that. Even if the ropes are twisted up on each other, it can be just really, really hard to retrieve. So this was jammed up in that epicormic sprout, that knot. And I just kept going up, not knowing, not thinking about it. And next thing I know, I'm about 30 feet up, maybe 35. And this is what the surgeons estimate based on the trauma of my fractures in my bones and stuff. This is what they estimated. I fell. I'm just falling all of a sudden. The ground is just coming up to me. And I'm thinking, I hope no one sees this. Again, I'm thinking like Nick's crew, I hope they don't see me fall out of this tree. And why is this happening? I didn't know why it was happening. But I was just thinking to myself, I'm going to just, as soon as I hit the ground, I am going to reset, and I'm going to get back up, and I'm going to start rope walking again, and hope that nobody sees this little blunder that I made. I didn't have enough time to think that this was going to be like a near-death experience. again, it was only a few seconds, but it felt like at least 15 seconds of me thinking, you know? And then I hit the ground and then black. That was it. That's the last thing I remember, is the ground coming up on me. Well, I landed on both my legs, and somebody, I think there was a witness report that I like landed with my fist down on the ground with my left, and so I kind of landed on my legs first, and then my arm hit as well. But then that was it, and it hit so hard that the muffs of my helmet, the earmuffs, got broken off, and I was knocked out cold. And the first responders were members of Nick's crew, and I probably owe my life to them in part because they cut my harness off, and I was not happy about that when I, months later, when I found out that my $600 brand new Teufelberger harness was cut off of me. But if they had waited to figure out how to get those buckles undone, I might have died, because the EMS was right around the corner. There was like an ambulance stationed right around the corner, and they showed up immediately. Call came in, probably from one of Nick's crew, and they were there. Police officer showed up as well. Nick was there. The police officer told him that I was going to be a dead-on arrival because I was bleeding out from the inside, and my face was totally gray. Nick said I looked like a ghost. And he didn't want to believe that. He wanted to believe that this wasn't that big of a deal. Well, I mean, he knew it was a big deal, but I think he was in shock. I mean, he thought that I would recover quickly too. And I remember waking up 3 days later with a tube down my throat. They had kept me in a induced coma to do reconstructive surgery on my pelvis mainly. My pelvis was the thing that got it the worst. It broke into like 5 pieces, and they had to bolt it back together. They also put metal in, like a plate in this wrist here, and a couple of my legs, like both legs, got some kind of hardware. And anyway, I wake up with like a tube down my throat in the most pain that I had ever felt. Delirious, totally delirious, just in tremendous agony. And I was trying to talk, but I couldn't. I wanted to find out where my wife was. And then I also was trying to communicate that I was in horrible pain. And so I was trying to sign the letters, P, A, I, N, and one of the nurses saw me, and she's like, I think he's trying to do sign language. And I was trying to communicate my wife's name. It was just horrible. It was horrible. I didn't know, but my wife already knew what was going on. I thought it was the same day. At first I was thinking it was just some horrible nightmare. Maybe I'm just going to wake up. But eventually it dawned on me that this actually happened, and I was in the hospital. And my wife had already been notified days earlier and had been there by my side during a lot of it. And my family had even, my parents had come down to see. And they, so when I wake up, I'm just in horrible agony. I didn't know that they had already given me as many painkillers as they could have, but it didn't have any effect, hardly. I mean, it was just horrible, horrible pain. And little by little, as days went by, like I couldn't sit up. I wasn't able to move anything below my waist, so I was paralyzed below my waist. And I remember, eventually I was cognizant enough that I was aware that my wife was there, and my parents were there. And this was during COVID. This was when the outbreak of COVID was like still pretty new. So they wouldn't let more than one person visit me at the same time. If it was one person visiting me, that was it for the whole day. So one day I might get to see Jane, but then I wouldn't get to see either of my parents. I'd have to wait for one of them the next day or something like that. It was really hard, and they couldn't stay overnight. They had to be out of there by like 8 p.m. or 9 p.m., something like that. So there was just a lot of time in ICU that I was like in horrible pain, crying out for nurses, and nobody would come because they were just understaffed, you know? They had a lot of other patients. I'd be hitting the little buzzer that they gave me because I couldn't move. I couldn't roll over. I couldn't do anything. And I would ask for them to like roll me over. But it would be so long before they would come. So I would start hollering for them too. I feel bad for them, for the nurses, because I'd be yelling and screaming for them to come into the room. I was probably a really needy patient, if I think about it. But anyway, I would, eventually somebody would come and they would try to roll me over, but they couldn't even roll me over without me feeling like my whole pelvis was gonna just fall apart. So I had to have like pillows put between my knees to kind of stabilize, and then they would, it'd take like 2 or 3 people to try to turn me over, and I couldn't bear to be on my side, either side. I couldn't bear to be on my back. It was just non-stop horrifying pain for days. Eventually, though, a PT team was assigned to me, and they wanted me to try to sit up, and this was like days into it, and I told them that I couldn't do it, and they were trying to get me to sit up anyway. They were starting to move my bed up to try to get me to sit up, and I cussed them out. I was like, look, if you do this, you're doing this against my will. I just screamed at them. I said, get out of here. I can't do it. Anyway, days proceeded after that. Another PT guy was assigned to me, and he convinced me to try to start sitting up, and it was horrible pain, but I did it. I just listened to some Christian rock music just to try to get my mind off the pain, and sat there. I think he made me sit there for like 10 minutes or something, or 5 minutes. It was something small, but it was hard to breathe doing it. That's how much it hurt to be sitting up, because the weight of my torso was on my pelvis, and my pelvis was just, really tender. So anyways, I get through little by little. I'm doing therapy, and you might be wondering, like, how did I go to the bathroom? Well, couldn't, right? So I had to have a whole team, like, nurses on staff to do that for me. Had to be cathetered, because nothing worked. Like, the organs down there didn't really work on their own anymore. And so little by little, they're trying to teach me how to get out of the bed to a wheelchair. So eventually I've sat up enough times that they can, that we can move on to the wheelchair, or start thinking about a wheelchair, I should say. Like, you had to be able to sit up for, an extended period of time before you were ready to even think about being in a wheelchair. But once I'm in the wheelchair, then I can like wheel around and actually be mobile, which was a really exciting thing to look forward to. Okay, that's a really exciting thing to look forward to. And they got me this thing called a slide board. It's just a piece of wood that you have to scoot from the hospital bed to the wheelchair. I remember trying to just get on that slide board, and how painful that was, scooting myself across to the wheelchair. And once you finally get to the wheelchair, it's like, oh, finally I made it here, and the whole time you feel like you're gonna just, like, your pelvis is gonna break apart if you jump too suddenly, or if you sit down too hard, if you move too hard. And then there's the fear of, like, what if the slide board kicks out in the middle of the transition to the wheelchair? Then I'm gonna have like a 3-foot drop or something to the floor. It was unbelievable. This whole time period is kind of a fog to me in a lot of ways, because I remember bits and pieces of, like, of what that was like. I remember a lot of hallucinations because of the drugs they had me on. But even in those hallucinations, I didn't, like, I was in these different worlds, you know. But in these different worlds, I was still in horrible agony. And so it was like hell. It was just like constant hell. And my wife told me that she saw me doing this a lot in the hospital bed. And the nurses would ask, what is he doing? And she told them, he's packing rope into a bag. So I was doing tree jobs in my dreams in the hospital. And I was calling clients. I still had clients calling me. And I was just really just a sole proprietor back then. I was not an LLC. I didn't have employees. I was just a climber who would take small jobs and occasionally bring a subcontractor in to help me. And that's who I was. But I was, you know, I had developed something of a reputation. And so a lot of word of mouth was still being spread about me, being a good tree worker. And so people would be calling me and saying, can you do this tree? And I was telling them, like, yeah, I can in a couple months, you know, in a couple months, I'll be ready to do that tree. Or I think I told one guy, like, a couple weeks. I really was in denial about how bad this injury was. I thought that I might be able to, you know, be climbing again in a couple weeks. I thought that if I could just stand up one time, then everything would start to repair itself faster, you know? Like, if I could just stand up one time, then I could start walking. And once I start walking, then my body, you know, the muscle atrophy will repair itself, everything will be fine, and I'll be good. But I was like I said, I was in total denial. And so the paralysis of my feet and legs remained for a really couple months. You know, and it was beginning to look like I wasn't maybe going to even be able to move my feet at all. And I had, like, ever, you know, like I was going to have permanent lifetime paralysis. And I had to come to this hard decision, which was like, am I going to continue to worship God even if I can never walk again, let alone climb? You know, am I going to continue to worship God and think that He is good? Because it felt really unfair. You know, why did this have to happen to me? I try to do the right thing. I try to be safety conscious. Why did it have to happen to me? And why in the prime of life for me? You know, I was 28 when this happened. Why in the prime of life? You know, it was really hard to wrestle with the idea that I might be paralyzed forever. But I came to this conclusion because I was like, I have no other choice. I've endeavored to follow Jesus, and I've said that this is my, I seek His kingdom whether I have health or not, whether I have, you know, relationships or not, whether I have poverty or prosperity. I'm going to seek the kingdom. And so this was the time for me to finally really put it to the test in a way that I had never had to do before, where my health was totally taken away from me for a period of time with that uncertainty over me. And I'm not going to say I did it well. I was struggling with depression. I was gritting my teeth in anger, but I was praying, Lord, help me continue to worship You. I trust You. I trust Your decision in this, whether I'm going to heal or not. I hope I'll heal. I'm asking for healing, but I accept whatever has to come of this. You know, that's kind of what my prayer was, but with a lot of anxiety in the midst of it. And a lot of people were praying for me. I mean, I had family members praying for me. I had family members' Bible studies praying for me. So lots of people that I didn't know were praying for me. And people were sending in cards and stuff like that too. Some people were even sending in checks, like financial checks to just help me and my wife during this time that I wasn't able to work. And it was such a blessing. And then I had a couple clients who wanted to wait for me to recover. They actually wanted to wait for me to recover. And that was so meaningful to me. That really helped inspire me and motivate me to get back into it. Like, they wanted to actually wait several months for me to start walking again and using crutches to do their job. And I'll get to that in a second. But that really helped pave the way back to a recovery for me. So I'm going to skip over the rest of that time in the hospital. I'm just going to go to the time that I got out. I got to a point where I could transition from the bed to the wheelchair, from the wheelchair to a toilet. I had to have a special toilet, you know. But it was like, I want to go home. I just told him, I said, I'm so sick of being in here with the stupid COVID rules, not being able to see my whole family. You know, I want to go home. And I think it was was it just in time for Thanksgiving or no? Yeah. So yeah, it was only a month. I was in the hospital for like a month and a half. That's it. It felt like an eternity, but I was really only in the hospital for a month and a half. I wasn't allowed to walk. I wasn't allowed to use crutches or anything until December. But the first, like by Thanksgiving, I was actually able to get out of the hospital. And I was able to have Thanksgiving at home. And my wife's friends, who are like family to her, they made a special trip up and they renovated one of our bathrooms in our home to make a stand-in shower. This guy, his name is Mr. Campbell. He spent, I want to say 3 or 4 days, maybe longer, but maybe it was a week. I don't remember for sure. But he was hard at it every day for hours and hours, constant going back and forth to Lowe's. He put in a nice stand-in shower, and that was important because my wheelchair couldn't fit through the door of our bedroom, and I couldn't get into a stand-up shower. Like I couldn't get into a regular bathtub is what I meant to say. I couldn't get into a regular bathtub, but I could wheel into a stand-in shower. And so he did that so that I could have a means of showering. We had other friends, our neighbors, come and build a wheelchair ramp outside one of our doors. And we had other friends do plenty of other things for us. I mean, people were coming around us and trying to help us as best they could. I remember Christy and Scott Thrift. They were friends of ours who I used to work for as a rock climbing guide. They did a lot of things for us in that time. And I remember friends coming from Fayetteville area, trying to, one guy brought me like a special apparatus that could like be a table at the couch that I was laid up on the couch for like a couple months. So he brought me this special apparatus that I could like have food on that and stuff, and there's just a lot of kindness shown to me during this time, people going out of their way. And I know Jane really appreciated that so much. That was such an encouragement. And my dad canceled my business insurance. I had company insurance for the, liability, general liability. He canceled it because he thought that I was never going to climb again. And I told him, I said, why would you cancel it? I plan on climbing again. I plan on getting back into this, provided the Lord will allow me to recover. And I remember he was so mad at me in that moment. He was like biting his lip. He's like, we don't need to talk about it right now because we don't know if you're even going to be able to walk again. But when he knew that I was like dead set on this, and I prodded him like, Dad, why are you upset about me doing this? He's like, yeah. Why would you want to put us through this again? Why would you want to risk that? So there was, even Jane was really concerned with it, but she didn't forbid me from trying again to climb. She was very, very, very concerned about it. There's something in me though that just wanted to get back into climbing. So I just kept praying, and I kept staring up at the trees from my wheelchair. I just kept staring up at the trees from my wheelchair. I remember back then we had this Toyota Tacoma that was a manual transmission, and And that's what we were using to pull our first chipper, which was like this 5,000 pound diesel powered 6-inch chipper. And I have these horrible driveways. And they're like steep, so backing up a driveway with a manual transmission and an underpowered truck is quite the feat. And I couldn't operate a clutch because my left foot couldn't bend down. The nerve damage didn't allow my left foot is like locked like this. And even to this day, 5 years later, I still am pretty locked up, like with my left foot. So I asked the physical therapy people how I could like learn how to drive clutch again, and they didn't want to give me any ideas. They didn't have any ideas, but I thought somebody's figured this out before. So I typed on YouTube like how to drive a clutch with one foot, and I found a video of a person with a prosthetic leg driving a clutch, and they had a prosthetic leg that could snap down, that they could adjust the angle of it. And so I was like, that's it right there. I need a brace that can kind of click down. So the VA was willing to set me up with a prosthetics or an orthopedic appliance company that made me a special brace that was angled like downward. And then I had other braces that were like L-shaped, and those were the braces that I was allowed to, I had to start using those with crutches at first to try to walk. And so come December time frame, I was starting to walk with crutches, but I had to have braces. And right after that, in January, like I don't remember the day exactly, if it was mid-January or late January, but I did my first job again. And I had to rent a lift because I obviously couldn't climb, but I pulled the logistics together, had a chipper on site, rented a lift, crutched my way up to the basket of the lift, and did an actual tree job, and made sure that everything got cleaned up. And it was just I don't know, it was unbelievable that I was able to do that so soon after the accident in crutches. Then I paid the price for it that night because I had the worst nerve pain that was just kept me up at night screaming for hours afterwards because I overworked myself. But in some ways it was worth it because I wanted to get back at it, and the Lord provided a way for me to get back at it. Little by little, I had the right friends, I had the right people around me, and then he provided a way for me to figure out how to get a job done. I had never rented an aerial lift before, but one of our stores, local rental places, had one, and I decided to do it. And it just barely fit in the driveway of the client's, property. It just barely was big enough to do the tree, Just all those little details, they just barely worked out to pave the way for me to complete that first job, which instilled the confidence to try another job and then another job. So I'm like, I'm crutching around with braces, but I'm starting to do jobs. Then I decide I'm going to try to spike up a tree again with my braces. I remember Jane was a little uneasy about that, but I just had to try it. And I did. I got up it. And so I think come April, I was back to starting to limb walk around and stuff and using the foot ascender again. I was starting to go higher. I was going as high as I had before. I was just much, much slower, but I was starting to do bigger scale jobs like normal. And the workflow just kept coming. And I don't know what was going through some of these clients' heads that were watching me show up to their estimate with crutches. That had to be weird. Like, hey, I'm going to call a tree guy, come do my job, and he shows up to do the estimate with crutches. It's like, what happened to you? Oh, I fell out of a tree. Oh, I want to hire this guy. I don't know. I don't know how I got I don't know how I got any of these jobs, but I did. People were hiring me still. I'm thankful for that. And anyways, little by little, like, it became very clear I couldn't do the groundwork anymore, so we had to hire. So, and I didn't even think I'd be able to climb, like, for real again. I was climbing little easy things, but it was like, I need to get an aerial lift because I'm not going to be able to, like, realistically climb a lot. So we got an aerial lift. We got that little nifty lift. And then we hired a couple employees, and we decided we need to be an LLC, not a sole proprietor. So we became an LLC. And then that was November of 2021. So it was just a little bit of a year after my accident. So I think I was still wearing those braces, but I was starting to do things more and more, bigger scale. And the nerve pain would be horrible if I overworked myself. So I had to do like one job and then rest for like 2 days, and then do another job and then rest for another 2 days. Like, I had to do that or I'd pay the price. And that was about all I could stomach anyway, because of all the equipment maintenance, moving things around. That's how the workflow was anyway at the time, so it worked out. But little by little, as the months turned into years, workflow started picking up more and more and more, and God kept sending us the right employees for the company, the way, the structure that we were. And I don't know when it was, but I eventually got to the point where I ditched the braces and I started just climbing with my regular boots, and my legs were strong enough to do the limb walks and sit in the spikes without those braces. And that felt like that was such an amazing feeling, because I didn't have to, have those cumbersome braces. And then I eventually upgraded the truck and didn't have a clutch anymore, so I didn't need that brace to drive a clutch anymore. That was nice. And we just kept growing. And then the last thing that I really wanted to do was wean myself off of gabapentin, because that's like a mood influencer drug, and I was determined to not be on gabapentin forever. I just felt like, as a Christian, the Lord should be my mental refuge. I shouldn't have a drug that is an antidepressant to keep me, happy. But it's a nerve pain inhibitor. And so every time I would lower my dose, that nerve pain would come back pretty hard. And sometimes the nerve pain would be so bad, I'd be on gabapentin and it would still be bad. And it was terrifying to like lower my dose. So I didn't do it very fast. It took me 3 years to slowly come off of all of that. And then the Oxycontin and the what else? Tramadol, lots of other, oxycodone, those drugs as well. Had to come off of those. But gabapentin was like one of those last things it was really scary to let that go. I also noticed that as I came off of it, every time I would lower my dose, I would have a really bad attitude for a few days, like for a week or something. Like, I would have a really bad attitude. I'd be like super easily angered, and then easily discouraged, feeling hopeless. So as I was lowering my dose, my mind was having a hard time adjusting to that lack of antidepressant. So that stuff is really bad. If you're hooked on that, like, it messes with your mind. You're not your real self, because that drug is like helping you perceive the world in a different way. So I'm really glad I got off of it, because now I'm back to my normal self. I'm not dependent on that chemical anymore. It was hard. It was hard. And people had to, around me, people had to understand that I was not myself. Like my wife, she had to put up with that. And I'm thankful that she did, because I didn't know how to, I don't know. I was, I knew what was happening, but it was hard to like overcome it. You know what I mean? I just had to continue to pray for the Lord to give me the wisdom, and to keep shaping me, despite all the craziness that was going on in my head. So anyway, after all that, I'm trying to think if there's anything else noteworthy to talk about. 5 years later now, I'm climbing better than I ever had before. I still can't run. My posture's off. My nerve damage is still inhibiting me from doing certain things. And I still occasionally have a back spasm, which can shut me down for like 4 days at a time. It's really bad. So I still have to be careful, but we're at pretty much a full schedule now. We work like a lot, you know. I'm doing manual labor every day now. I won't hesitate to ask my guys to pick up my climbing bag if I'm tired, or carry something heavy so that I don't have to. So I try to monitor myself, not throw my back out. Because again, that nerve damage, it throws off my posture, and like my gait is off, and so I've always got like an uneven kind of tension on my back now. So I have to be really careful. And I go through boots like really fast, because my left boot gets distorted and it gets like permanently damaged. Like I take out I forget what the heel part of it is called. I always like squish that part of it or ruin that part of it, and it's not like I could just get them resoled. Like I've damaged the structure of the boot itself because my weight is on it unevenly. So I end up having to go through boots quite frequently now, which is really annoying. I wish I could just buy a bunch of left boots, you know? That would be cool. But other than that, I'm really back to where, I mean, like I'm in a sense, I'm recovered. I haven't fully recovered, but I'm in a sense recovered. And I'm super thankful. I'm just so thankful. So, you know, what's the takeaway? The takeaway is be careful on a job. Don't have a fatigue related mistake. Like, don't let yourself be overly fatigued. And if you are overly fatigued, then you need to call it off, probably. That's what you need to do. I hate that because, like, you know, I'm kind of like a go mindset that just wants to constantly push, be as productive as possible, keep being more productive. And, you know, the Army taught that, at least my unit did. Like, you don't need sleep. You just keep moving, keep marching, keep going. But, man, I'll tell you what, like, that accident, it's not worth it. It's really not worth it. It's not worth the extra money. And if I knew that was going to happen again, I'd give this up, because that's how bad it was. It was so bad. Words can't describe the agony for months that I had. It challenged my faith. It stressed my marriage. It also showed me how amazing my wife is, because she was such a caretaker during that time. She served me tremendously. But it would be so unfair for me to be careless and let that happen again and put her through that again. It'd be terrible. So, you know, guard yourself, be humble if you're in this line of work, or if you're in a line of work that has high risk associated with it. Somebody's got to do the work, right? Might as well be people who are qualified, and people who have integrity, and people who are try to be ethical. You know, that's kind of how I look at it. I should be in tree work. I'm passionate about it. I know it really well. And I try to have ethics while I do it. So I'm a great candidate to do tree work. Somebody's got to do it. But do it with a spirit of humility. Don't be so arrogant. Don't think that you're Superman, that nothing bad can happen to you. And just don't be cocky. There's a lot of verses throughout the Bible that say that God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. And I depend on his grace now, every day to get through life, you know? I depend on his grace, and I've seen his grace cover me. Even though I was proud, he was, you know, he was merciful to me. But he's also let me experience some humbling things, not just that accident, other things too. I've made mistakes and learned from them through humiliation, right? It's just not worth it to be cocky and then have an accident like this happen. As far as like my faith is stronger because of it, I do believe. And I'm so thankful for so many of the people who prayed for me during that whole time and continue to pray for me when I do these hazardous jobs, which come quite frequently, and people will be praying for us, and it's amazing seeing the Lord's provision throughout some of these jobs. I could write a book on some of these jobs, how miraculous, how God has like provided for us, and so you know the injury definitely was a period of just testing my faith, but coming out of that with stronger faith. You know, coming out of it really appreciating my marriage even more. Coming out of it appreciating my family more. Coming out of it appreciating those friends who were there for me even more. And also just coming out of it appreciating what it feels like to climb. Like I really appreciate that a lot more now. I loved it before, I love it even more now. And I almost had PTSD from like that would have prevented me from getting back into a harness. Like I was terrified of that pain, you know. But my love for climbing outweighed the fear of another accident, and so I got through that. I do believe that for some people PTSD can be a choice. Like your love for life can outweigh your fears and anxieties, even if something traumatic has happened to you. People are going to probably be like, no, in my case, you know, I don't have any control over my PTSD, and that might be true for some people, but like, why not try to overcome it? Just try to overcome it with your perspective. I had to pray for perspective. I had to pray for courage from the Lord. Sometimes I still do have to pray for courage to get through a sketchy job, you know. And I definitely pray for wisdom, and I definitely pray for his protection, right? So anyways, those are the takeaways. I hope this video has inspired at least a couple people, and yeah, stay safe out there. Thanks for watching.